Hey, crew, and welcome back. We are continuing on our Amazon software deep dive, and today we have Aura. Now, Dylan is the co founder of Aura, and how he created the software is much like how if you're talking to your Amazon friend about a need and you're like, we should create something. But of course, they have the background and all of that. So let's jump in and see all about this AI maven, Aura, and how it can help you in your Amazon business.
Hi, and welcome to Your Selling Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Kirk, aka Your Selling Guide. In 2017, I quit a steady corporate desk job to travel the US in an RV. Along the way, I started selling on Amazon, grew multiple successful businesses, and wound up back to my roots as a small town girl. Today, I'm still doing what I love, selling on Amazon and helping other sellers start and grow their own online businesses. Each week on Your Selling Podcast, we will cover different aspects of selling online and highlight other sellers just like you and I. From part-time sellers creating extra income on the side to full-time sellers growing million-dollar businesses. Think of this as a sit-down with your Amazon bestie where we can learn and grow our online businesses together. Welcome to Your Selling Podcast.
Welcome, Dylan, to the podcast. I'm very excited to have you and to hear all about Aura because I have heard so much about it from the community.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's nice to hear that you're hearing a bunch of stuff. We've been pushing a lot lately. Even today, we had a release of a new integration, so we've been busy.
So we chatted a little bit before, but how did you get into like online selling and then into this software? Because building software, I can't even imagine how hard that is. But how'd you get into this
Yeah,
whole thing?
yeah, great question. So I've spent a third of my life in the Amazon space, either as a seller or in the software side, which I'm not sure how to feel about. I feel like I'm getting old now. But so initially, I was a personal trainer full time. I was trying to figure out what to do with my life after high school. I knew I wanted to do my own thing, but wasn't sure what that was yet. And so I got real big into lifting, became nationally certified, started to do that for money, and heard about selling on Amazon from Pat Flynn's podcast with the Selling Family like forever ago. And I was like, that sounds cool. And like, it's the traditional seller path, right? I heard about it, downloaded the app, scanned a few things. They sold, it was real. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And for me, I view every decision based on scalability. So at the time, I couldn't scale my income without working more. And that became a problem. And I really found a niche where I was working with middle and high school aged kids that were dealing with self esteem issues. So a lot of my personal training work was that. It was really psychological, a lot of lifting, of course, but really helping kids through that. And if I wanted to make more money, I kind of had to go to their parents and be like, you have to pay more per hour. And that just felt wrong to me as a value add. And so initially, that became kind of a problem for me. And I left the gym and my client said, hey, we'll go wherever you want. And I just said, you know what? It's a big fork in the road for me. I'm going to go back to school full time. So I went to college full time as a finance major because I thought I wanted to go in like investment banking, private equity, something like that. But then started selling, doing a retail arbitrage. So I'd spend every waking hour I could scanning and try to transition because like that was more scalable than working per hour kind of thing. But it was really difficult being in school full time because I wanted to be in class. I was interested in the subject matter. And so time got really restricted and I tried online arbitrage, which at that point, there was nowhere near the amount of software and tools available. So I was horrible at it. I'll be frank, did not do well. And then said, okay, I got to make a decision here. What's the next most scalable thing? For me, it was wholesale, right? You kind of have wholesale and private label. I needed wholesale because I needed to pay the bills. And so I did that. I struggled for actually about 3 to 4 months, just trying to wrap my head around it. Cause at that time, there was not a lot of education related to here's how you do this. So I was kind of just figuring it out. Eventually I realized the skill was sells. It was selling. That was it. Right. And once that clicked, it started to take off. And I then met my now co-founder, James, because I was DMing everyone on Instagram who had a 7-figure wholesale business when I was doing 6. And I said, hey, I'll give you whatever you want per hour. I just want to ask you, how do I scale from 6 to 7? And he was the only one to respond and the only one to say, don't worry about the money. Let's just chat. And at the time I had a blog, my personal blog. I was just writing, kind of sharing my thoughts. And so we started talking every single week, just, hey, riffing on ideas. What are you doing here? Blah, blah, blah. And come to find out, he was a computer science major at the time. And he's like, hey, I'm actually writing software to solve these problems, like internally. You want to team up? I'm like, yeah, sounds awesome. So, what's more scalable than physical products? Well, it's information, it's code, it's software. So we started to work on VinDriveCRM.com. That was our first software. And it was really just a piece of software based on what we were already doing with Trello, Google Sheets, and all these different things, just pulling in Amazon information. And so we really pushed hard on that, had the Wholesale Made Easy podcast where we were kind of teaching. We were live sourcing every Tuesday for like 2.5 years to build out the first real wholesale focused podcast and Facebook group at the time. And so we launched it. We got it decent, nothing crazy, but we made all the mistakes because we had no idea what we were doing. And we said, okay, well, that market's really small, just wholesale Amazon sellers. It's like a niche within a niche within a niche within a niche. We've proven that we love building software and products. It's just really fun, but this doesn't scale. Let's take our learnings and pivot into something that we really want to build, that we see a major problem as sellers. And for us, that was repricing, because we had used all the other tools and it was really cumbersome. It's really overwhelming. And I actually put it off for years before I even was comfortable to test it, because so many things go wrong. There's all these horror stories. And so we said, well, why don't we take that experience and build a product that removes a lot of that? And so we started to essentially sunset VinDriveCRM.com. So we stopped working on it. We told users, hey, we're going to pivot over, and spent like 9-ish months. James did copious amounts of Red Bull, just riding the beta and building up the beta group, testing and all that stuff. And after 9 months, we launched. I actually flew up to his college between semesters on winter break. We launched and I flew back home and went to go take exams. And it just took off, which was awesome. So how I got into software is very much a bit of luck and happenstance, but also just being willing to jump into conversations and ask questions and kind of see the opportunities and understand what did I want out of it. And so I actually shut down my profitable wholesale Amazon business to do this full time, because it's like, this is cool. Yeah, it makes money, but this is where I want to go the next 10 years. And so when we sat down, we said, what is this? Is it a lifestyle business? Is it just a fun side project? And we said, no, we're going to dedicate 10 years of our lives to this at minimum. And we're going to build a real company here.
Wow. What year was this?
Yep. We launched Aura beta December 2018.
19?
18.
Yeah.
18.
Oh, 18.
Yeah.
I was going to say right before all the other sellers started jumping on in 2020.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's so cool. So I'm going to ask random questions. But so when you were doing the wholesale, you said it's still up. Anyone can go still listen to that?
Wholesale Made Easy.
Podcast?
Yeah. So if you go to VinDriveCRM.com/podcast, you can also just search Wholesale Made Easy. Yeah, it's still up there. When we set out to do that, one, I was just curious about how to start a podcast because it was all the hype back then. And two, I realized there was a cool hack. If you want to meet the people that would never give you the time of day, start a podcast, because they'll talk about themselves and you'll talk before and after, right? So I had people like Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First, which everybody followed back then. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but I emailed him out of the blue. He's like, yeah, sounds good. Let's do it next Tuesday. I was like, okay, sounds great. So yeah, we did that, but I wanted it to be evergreen content. I didn't want it to be a bunch of tactics. For me, I was like, there's no good freely available content on what really is wholesale, because a lot of what was talked about was correct, but it wasn't giving the right mindset for it to click with people. So a lot of people were struggling with it. And once I said, hey, this is the skill set of sales, you're dealing with objections, we can kind of create a model on how to think about this. A lot of people started to say, oh, that actually makes a lot more sense. And so we can move. And so I think we got to 54 episodes and I kind of ran out of stuff. I'm like, we've covered it all. We're done here. Like, we'll still support it in terms of keeping it up, but we're good. And we stopped adding new episodes.
Hey crew, is your Amazon business set up for success this year? Do you know how much profit you really made on the item you just sold? Or what about this? Do you notice when the Amazon FBA fees change on a product in your inventory? These are just some of the reasons why I love Sellerboard and why I've partnered with them on the You're Selling podcast. I have been using Sellerboard for 4 years now, and I absolutely do not know how I will run my business without it. I love how simple Sellerboard is to use. The desktop version is set up so easy. As soon as you connect your Amazon account, all of your products from the past, anything you've ever sold, is gonna flow into that. And the way I love it and use it the most is actually when I'm outsourcing. I have Sellerboard app right on my phone and I can visually see the images of the products I'm selling today, yesterday, last month, last year, Whatever I want to look at, I can see it in real time right on my Sellerboard app. Sellerboard is an affordable must-have tool for all Amazon sellers. And as listeners of this podcast, they have given you 2 months free to try it out for yourself. There's absolutely no credit card required to sign up, and you can cancel at any time. Head to yoursellingguide.com/sellerboardprofit to set up your free trial today. Again, yoursellingguide.com/sellerboardprofit to get your 2-month free trial today.
Well, that's crazy. Yeah, because I just love how everything is just networking at the end of the day. And I
Yeah.
am very much an introvert. And so it's
Me
not
too.
in my nature to go. I cannot tell with you, but it's not in my nature to go out there and like
Yeah.
talk to other people and reach out to people. But I love how you said, I'm at 6 figures. I want to be at 7 figures. And you went and you
Yeah.
reached out to the people who are there and just learning up. So that is a great tip
Yeah.
right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
But
people want to talk about this, right? A lot of people in sellers' lives are not sellers. And so they want to talk about these things. And, when I was a seller up until like a year ago, my parents had no idea what I did. They're like, "Who do you work for?" I was like, "No, like we started a company." And like, "Do you still sell things on Amazon kind of?" I was like, "No, it's a software thing." Like, "What do you mean?" It's like I literally had to do like a slide deck presentation to get them to understand what I did. Even now my wife's like, "I really don't know what you do." So sellers want to talk about it, especially if they have had any level of success. They want to share that. I think the younger generation of sellers, as I like to call them now, that are all held up in Brickell in Miami, they're taking a completely different approach. When I was a seller, nobody shared anything. It was hard to get somebody to jump onto a Skype call to have a open conversation. Now these guys are
Mhm.
sourcing on Zoom together and just be like, "Oh, I found 5 cool things. Here you go, everyone." And then somebody goes, "Oh, cool, I found another 10. Here you go, everyone." And they got like a pod, like a sourcing pod, and they're
Yeah.
scaling like crazy. But yeah, I think you have to be willing to ask the questions. I actually wrote a whole blog post on how to network as a seller because I'm by nature introverted. People, I think, call me a extroverted introvert. So I am very introverted, but I can do this. But so it takes a lot for me to build that skill set, but you can do it, certainly.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill set you get
Yeah.
better at it the more you go, but that's why I love talking to other sellers on any level because we all even though we're doing the same thing, we all do it a little bit different and you just
Yes.
learn something that you didn't even know you didn't know. And so, yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So when you started this, you kind of already had your people from the other software. So was it just you using them kind of as your beta group and getting like, what do you need? Or was it built off of more
Mhm.
what you knew you needed as a seller?
Kind of both. You have to. This is the hard thing about running a software company. You can't just do what's asked of you from users because users aren't product people. That's our responsibility. So what a lot of softwares do in our space is they take the provided solution from the user and just give them that. That's not critical thinking. Our challenge is how do we break down what is the problem you're having, use our skill set to solve it in a better way than you could ever imagine. Because this is what we do time and time again, right? We're probably one of the few software companies in the Amazon space that has a full-time product designer on staff. All he does full time in the office is design the product, meaning how does it look? How does it feel? How do you use it? How do we make it better? We user tests with things. So before we just roll things out, we'll have users look at the design before even writing code. So back then, it was a lot of conversations of we like with potential users, like kind of understanding what do you find like frustrating about this? Like, what are those issues? But we had already used the software ourselves too. So we already had some kind of insights as to what we liked, what we didn't like. Like one of the obvious things was support. Like support's just horrible in the Amazon software space. Why? Because it's always outsourced for $4 an hour. Well, when you outsource things, I don't care if that person's full time, they're not bought into what you're building, the point of what you're building. They're not critical to the team. And so their incentive to provide an amazing experience is very low. They're just getting hours. So when we launched, we said one of the key pillars that we will stand on is not just amazing product, it's going to be amazing support. And so as one of the co-founders, I did full-time customer support and built out that whole system for the first 2.5 years. And we had advisors be like, that's not worth your time as a founder. Your time's worth more. I said, no, it's not. This is the best use of my time because I'm talking directly to every single customer. I personally onboarded the first 300 users. And the amount of
Nice.
value and feedback I got from that changed everything. And
Right.
so Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So do you have a current Facebook group now where you talk to customers or they talk to each other?
So less on the Facebook group side. We did build out a Discord because everybody's going there. So actually, if you go to the landing page, goor.com and scroll down, we link out to all that. We're really active on Twitter, to be honest.
Okay.
But a lot of the customer conversations are via live chat, like actual support channels or email. And I will actually jump into Zoom calls like this. If I can tell somebody's struggling online and they're posting about it, I'll be like, hey, do you have like 20 minutes to jump into a Zoom call? Let's figure this out. Like, we don't need to
Oh,
wait,
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a friend who was like, "Oh yeah, I'm supposed to have a call with Dylan so he can help me." And I was like, "Okay." But no, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny. People don't believe me when they're like, how can people contact you? I'm like, here's my email me. I want you to. And people are like, nah, you're not going to respond. I'm like, no, I will. I promise.
Okay, so let's jump into the repricer itself. That's the
Yeah.
only thing you have right now, right? Is just the repricer part of it.
That's the main focus. Exactly.
Okay, so what makes it different than other repricers? Because I know the one I tried in the past, what I did not like about it is
Mhm.
it automatically, unless I changed a setting, was set to
Yeah.
penny drop, which just seems
Right.
anti
Of course.
repricer.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's frustrating. I'm laughing because I've experienced this. Okay. So I love this question because I don't start with the product ever. I always start with the team behind it. We don't outsource anything. Our team's amazing. There's 6 people going on 7 of us. We're hiring another engineer now, software engineer. Um, the biggest thing is being able to understand how can I get into using this product in a way that doesn't require a lot of time, a lot of friction for me, and I can feel supported. So I highlight this because, and I proudly say we don't offer 24/7 support. Why do I say that? Because most of the time when people say we offer 24/7 support, it means you can email us whenever you want, but the response time is going to be 8 hours. Okay, how's that good? So we don't do that. You can definitely email us. It all goes to the same inbox. We have live chat from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. EST. And we have 2 metrics that I measure our team every Monday. I sit down with everybody on the team and do one-on-ones. For support, median first response time has to be less than 10 minutes. I looked at it today. It was 4.5 minutes median, right? During business hours. Second one is customer satisfaction. Cause if I just have speed, my team can hack that. Customer satisfaction has to be greater than 95. We tend to hit 98 to 100%. So not only can I give you high quality support, I can do it fast. And that's important. Now, the second part about that is we will personally onboard you if we need to. So we've designed our system so that you can jump in, be up and running, repricing in 10 minutes if you know what you're doing and never talk to us and crush it. That's not everyone. Some people need more hands-on, and there's nothing wrong with that. And so we've designed the system to be so scalable for the people who don't need to talk to us, or for people where we can kind of proactively let them know things, so that we can create the time to say, hey, if you need to be personally onboarded, here's a link. Let's schedule it this week. We got you covered. It's 20 minutes. We literally take you from like, I'm overwhelmed, everybody tells me to reprice, and like, I'm scared, to 20 minutes later, you're up and repricing because we did it with you, answered all your questions, gave you the best practices, and you feel good about it and excited. We do that in 20 minutes. So before we even get into the product, that by itself is vastly different than our competition. Most of them cannot do this at scale like we can. We've been so intentional about building that out. Now, on the product side, there's certainly a lot. We spent 18 months rebuilding legacy Aura from the ground up. That's not marketing hype. We literally changed the language we wrote it in. We had to re-architect, which is nerd speak for how we model everything. Like, we literally burnt the company down. And we said, what do we know now? The branding needs to be stronger. We updated our branding. The design needs to be scalable because we had features we wanted to add that it's like, oh, we'll just put it on this page. Well, where? There has to be some semblance of rationale and logic for where you put things in software. We didn't have that. So we hired a product designer and we said, we need this to be beautiful, easy to use, and needs to be scalable. Great, problem solved. We couldn't add new features to Legacy because it was not built to scale as fast and as far as it had. So we built it for scalability. But we also built it so it was easy to do things like add integrations, which is why in the last, 7 days, we've added 2. We just launched another one today. We can do it in a day instead of 2 months. And so we fundamentally rebuilt everything. And we call it the 1.0 system. It's fundamentally different. And At a high level, I see two problems that sellers are dealing with: speed and complexity. It's the only two things, like if we want to kind of simplify it. So why do I say that? Because you have so many variables coming into play when you're making pricing decisions, and they keep, getting more complex, more variables to consider, and you need to be able to react to those things really fast. That's really hard to do as a human. And so we took a step back and said, okay, those are the two problems. How do we solve them? Well, the first one, we actually stumbled on something cool that I've yet to see any of our competition have. It's because we were already re-architecting and rebuilding it from the ground up when the old API that we use got deprecated, meaning they said it's going to stop working in 3 weeks, figure it out. Here's the new one. Well, what software developers do is they don't go, cool, here's all the new things, let's go build a bunch of stuff. They go, no, swap out the endpoints, just stabilize. So we stabilized for legacy because we still had that at the time. But with the new product, with 1.0, we said, first principles, what can we do here? Is we did have the time to play around. And we found that there's a unique feature we could develop called hyperdrive. Now, for some context here, we've always had instant repricing. Anything less than instant is basically a waste of your money. Let's just be frank. Now, instant does not mean immediately instant. What instant really means is, in our software, what we can control, we are instant. There's no delay. If you're getting anything slower than instant, you're being penalized for not paying enough. That's the reality of it. Now, instant really means 1.5 to 2 minutes on average. The reason for that is when we receive a price change notification, we react to it instantly and send it back. When we send it back, we submit it to Amazon via the API. It's going to take 1.5 to 2 minutes round trip for it to come back in Amazon and say, that's good, it's accepted, it's confirmed, and it's reflected. So instant really means 1.5 to 2 minutes. I always have to give this context because what I'm about to say breaks the concept of instant. Hyperdrive, we have found a way to do that round trip in less than 10 seconds. We can only do this up to 50 SKUs. There's a technical limit there. But we're talking a 12x theoretical increase in speed with one toggle. All you do is toggle on a listing. So that's speed. So cool, solved it for the most part. Complexity is its own thing. And so I used to do, tons of podcast interviews and be like, hey, what's the default go-to strategy you recommend everybody to start with? I had a pretty good answer. Now I don't, because the reality of it is every single one of your SKUs should have a strategy designed and fine-tuned for it, and it should change moment by moment. Good luck. Can't do it. You got 1,000 SKUs, 1,000 strategies, and oh, by the way, you need to update it every 5 minutes. No, doesn't work. What sellers don't need is yet another strategy. We need to take a step back and build a model that can understand where it needs to go. So we're clearly defining success, what is true, and then utilize behaviors, basically build its own strategy to close that gap. So we designed something called Maven. It's our version of AI strategies. I call it more of a model than a strategy intentionally. People are used to the term strategy, but it's not a bunch of settings you go in and fine tune. If somebody says, I have a AI strategy and there's 10 something settings, it's not how that works. So your normal rule-based strategy, I don't care what company you're talking about, even us, will have anywhere from 15 to 30 settings that the end user, so the seller, has to understand and set themselves. Don't mess it up, right? Because you can. Maven has one. How do you want to set your min prices? That's the only thing you should care about. Everything else is handled for you. Dynamic max prices, all that. So here's how this works. How you define success is so important. Historically, what we've done as sellers is take a very simplistic approach. My sales went up. That's good. My buy box ownership went up. That's good. Is it? Because I can hack that immediately. If you say increase my sales and you can only make one move, I'm going to lower all your prices by 30%. Guaranteed you'll get more sales. Are you happy? No. Same thing for buy box. You want more buy box? Keep lowering the price. You'll get more buybacks. Are you happy? No. So we had to take a step back and say, well, how do we actually define success in a way that makes sense? So you have two levers you can pull when you're talking your price optimization. You have velocity and profitability. These two things oppose one another, but there is a balance. So Maven's designed to find that balance. So we're not giving up tons of velocity, but we're also not giving up tons of margin either. We're trying to find that balance, and that balance shifts, by the way, as the market itself changes. So we call that the optimal price. It's an actual price. It's a calculation we do. We do this on the fly, meaning Right now, the optimal price could be $60. In 2 weeks, it could be 75. So we have a moving target as your competition changes, as the supply and demand changes, all these things. So we know where we want to go, which we define success as you are at the optimal price as often as possible. That's good. Now we need to understand where are we at, what's true. Well, we do this using game theory because it makes a ton of sense. Actually, when you think about it theoretically, it's game theory, which is awesome. But game theory by itself is actually really simple to understand as an algorithm even. Game theory boils down to this. If you and I are going to compete and I have to go first and I don't know what you're going to do, I'm going to not compete with you. In our language of repricing, I'm going to match you. I'm going to see what you do on your turn. If you match me, I'll continue matching you. The moment you compete with me, aka reprice beneath me, I will do the same to you and continue doing that until you stop. Game theory. That's literally the concept of game theory. Okay, so simple, but the model is what I care about. It's less the behavior, it's the understanding of like, this is the world we operate in. So how do we take advantage of that? We do so by studying every one of your competitors to understand, are they competitive or non-competitive? Are they going to match us or not match us? And what do I need to do for every one of my competitors to win? Because sometimes you need to reprice below by a penny to pull the buy box. Sometimes it has to be 10 pennies. So we store all that information. So we know depending on who I'm competing with, I can change my behavior. So why is this important? Because I know all the facts now. I know where I want to get to. I can basically take that information and decide which behaviors to utilize to close that gap. So what happens is the optimal price tends to be slightly higher than the current buy box, which initially I was like, why is that? But then I thought about it from an economics perspective and it makes a lot of sense. If you have a lot of competition, what happens? You have downward pressure on the price. So funny enough, if you look on Twitter and a bunch of social channels from Aura users, they'll typically show like, hey, I got a sale at 25 and then 30 minutes later, I got a sell at 32. Maven raised it. So it's interesting. We have this downward pressure. Maven's able to actually release that pressure, which is really cool. So for us, we try to take all this complexity that I just brain dumped on all of you and say, hey, you don't have to understand it. All you have to do is use it. Set one setting, which is your minimum price, because that is specific to you. We'll handle everything else. So what happens when you pair Maven handling far more complexities and adapting itself in real time with hyperdrive? Turns out a really amazing level of performance. So for us, it always comes back to technical leverage. How do we design software so that the end consumer, the user, the seller can understand less of it and still get more performance over time? And that's what we built.
I like it. I like anything where I don't have to do a lot of thinking.
Yeah. I literally, we had somebody new come on and he sent me a Twitter message earlier, which is like, I'm the laziest repricer and this is awesome. Like he literally showed me screenshots like the day after and he's like, yeah, you 3x my revenue and I did nothing. This is sick. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Because again, we've been sellers. I don't want to do a bunch of more work. That sucks. Tech people are lazy, straight up. We are so lazy because we're like, oh, software can do that. I'm not doing that. So at a high level, that's how we are different. There's a bunch of subtleties, of course, just building amazing, intuitive software, things that, kind of minimal. We take a lot from Apple design, but even mobile, like this is an actual live demo account here. Everything you can do on your computer, you could do here, including support. Because we found a lot of sellers were posting pictures with their laptops in their lap in their car, trying to do ROI and be like, oh, I'm updating my pricing. Sucks. Your phone's already in your hand anyways because you're scanning. Just do it there. Easy.
So when you say all we would have to do is enter our minimum price that we want to do, is there formulas in it that like help it? So like my minimum maybe would be 50% ROI, but if I bought it for $1, I don't want 50% ROI. So is there like settings like that help me figure that out, or is that something I have to know?
No, definitely not. I rarely recommend that you manually set your min prices because things do fluctuate, your costs, fees, whatever. No, so when I say you have to set your min settings, it's really like, how do you want Aura to do it for you? So you have to give us your costs. That's the input from you, the seller. You would tell us, hey, I want 30% minimum ROI or a profit floor, which is an additional option. So you can say, I want to make 30% ROI or at least $5, whichever is greater. And so Aura can do that for you. Yeah.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You mentioned entering the cost and you also mentioned integration. So is there
Yes.
anything that you are currently integrated with where like maybe I'm going to say inventory lab because that's what I use, where it would pull it
Yeah.
in from there or how's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been integrated with Inventory Labs for a number of years. In the last 7 days, we've added two new integrations, including one today. So we now have Scan Power integration, which is a little bit. It's actually way faster. It's every 15 minutes versus Inventory Labs only once an hour. So Scan Power is really fast, but also we import the mins and maxes because there are some sellers that want to manually set them. They're exceptions. So we allow you to do that as well. What's nice about that is it's a configuration. So you can say, I only want you to pull in my costs and my mins, and you handle maxes for me. We can do that. As of today, we just launched a Restock Pro integration as well. So a lot of wholesale based sellers are using that. So we're integrated there. So for that, you choose, do you want to import the last cost or the average cost? You just tell us which one, and you can historically pull that in for all your SKUs.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know for some of my other softwares, not repricers, but like entering the cost of goods is one of the
Yes.
manual parts that takes a while. So that's cool that it's
Yeah.
already integrated with a lot of things.
Yeah, and if we're not integrated with what you are using, most software will allow you to export that. We have an uploads feature. So if you do need to do that manually, you don't have to do it one by one. And what's so nice and why I like to lead with like the team before the product and what we are just talking about, you could reach out to our team and say, "Hey, I just got up and running. I have this Excel spreadsheet. Can you help me get it uploaded?" Yes, we'll do it for you in your account. Don't worry about it. Give us 10 minutes. I don't want, you're already busy. Like most sellers have a full-time job, have kids, all these things. I'm like, don't take, if you have 30 minutes to get something done, or I'm sorry, if you have 10 minutes to get something done, I would rather you take the 10 minutes to tell us what you need to get done and let us do it for you than you try to figure it out yourself. Not that it's complicated. It's just, I can speed you up. Why not?
Yeah, I appreciate that because I'm pretty familiar with all Excel sheets. I've worked in corporate America. I've done all that, but still some of the uploads, I mean, especially
I
Amazon
know.
specifically, I'm like, wait,
Yes.
you want what, where? And I do it and it's still not good enough. And yeah, so that's really helpful. You really do
Oh,
have
of
great
course.
service. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we care about it. Again, we've been sellers. So like, I know what it feels like to get started with repricing if you've never used a repricing tool, or if you use some of our more complicated competitors. You're just like, I'm annoyed and overwhelmed and frustrated. We're like, yeah, I get it. Let's just help you out here. We got you covered.
So I did look at your website and you have basically like a starter level and then you have looks like 3 other tiers above that.
Yeah.
So what does that entail? And you also have a free 2 weeks free, right? Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So every tier has free 2 weeks trial. We don't ask for a credit card up front. My whole thing when somebody comes to me and they're like, sell me on Aura, I go, no. Start a free trial. Don't give me any kind of billing information. Go use it. Have my team onboard you and you tell me. I'm not going to sell you. We don't do sales. I want the product to be so good that I don't need to, right? So with Legacy Aura, so prior to the 1.0 launch, we only had one tier. Everybody got everything. The problem with that is we had people doing 5 million a month paying the same people as doing 5 grand a month. That just doesn't work because those two people have fundamentally different needs. And so when we came out with the first version of multi tiers, we only came out with one additional. So we had Essential, which is what we've always had at 97. We came out with Pro at 497, and only Pro had access to Maven. We did this intentionally because when you're doing price optimization for software for SaaS like we are, you need to use data to make that decision. We didn't have any because you're going from one to many. So we said, let's make it painful and get the feedback from users, which sounds kind of odd, but it was the right decision. So we did that. We got tons of feedback. And part of it was Pro's too expensive. We said, yeah, that makes sense. Let's bring it down to 397. The other one was, hey, that's a big jump from 97 to 397. We said, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we added the plus tier at 197. And then another thing came out, a lot of software do limitations based on number of listings, but listings don't correlate to revenue. So when you come to me and you say, fundamentally, what do you do? I say, well, I optimize your prices to give you better sales, not give you more SKUs, right? So it's kind of weird. And because they don't correlate, it's a weird thing. So he said, okay, we don't care how many SKUs you have. I could care less. I care about your revenue. That's what I'm impacting here. So we said every tier has unlimited listings. AI listings is its own thing. We're going to care about revenue. So we actually looked at the actual spread of revenue for our users. And we say, great, what tier makes sense? And how do we cover 98% of everybody so that it's actually not a big jump. And so that's what we did. So the only thing that pushes people forward is their revenue, but it jumps a lot. Like it's a lot of revenue jumps before you get pushed forward. But I don't like when companies push people forward to pay more and you don't get anything extra. That doesn't work. And so another thing we heard was, hey, I don't care how much I'm paying you. I want access to AI. So yeah, I get that. I'm that guy too. So we said, cool. Everybody gets access to all the features, but in limited usage, because you don't need the same usage of Maven, Hyperdrive, all these different things doing $5,000 a month when somebody's doing $500,000 a month. So we said, cool, let's look at the actual usage patterns, because before we did this, it was unlimited. We just said, let's look at basically the kind of organic usage and then use that to determine what makes the most sense here for packaging. So we did that. And so what's funny is when we came out with the second version of pricing, we had people jumping into support, be like, hey, thanks for listening, which is funny, right? Like we're changing our pricing. They're like, hey, thanks. That rarely happens in software, but that was the whole point, right? We wanted our users to influence what the pricing became in a way that made sense for both parties. So we did that. We said, cool, everything's going well. But there's a big gap and a big problem for me, which was, as a software company ourselves, as a startup, which is what we consider ourselves, we always got access to the startup programs for the tools we use. They said, hey, I know you can't pay $1,000 a month right now. In a year, you can. Pay us $250 because you're new. So that's kind of nice, actually. So we said, why don't we do that? So we said, okay, let's create our own version of this, and we're going to call it the early stage program. And what we're going to do, we look at our number of users and we said, who leaves us the most? People under 10K. Well, why do they leave us? Because it feels expensive, but they want to use us. We had people be like, I want to use you, but 97 starting is really tough when I'm doing less than $10,000 a month. I was like, yeah, it totally makes sense. So we said, okay, let's create a program where for you, basically the only qualification is you're doing less than $10,000 a month in revenue. And we look at the average of the last 2 months. Do that, you're good. So if you qualify for up to 12 months, you can use Aura. All the features, Maven, Hyperdrive, all that. Limited usage. Again, you're not going to have access to 100% of the usage on everything because you don't need it. But you could stay on that for up to 12 months. Meaning if you're just getting started, you're figuring out the business, there's no, I got to figure this out in 3 months. No, take a whole year. We don't care. If after a year, you're still less than 10K, you go to the essential tier at 97. But if you outgrow it in that first 12 months, we'll give you a 50% discount for the first 3 months on the next tier. So we're smoothing out the cost curve for sellers. And what's cool about this is you get access to the same functionality that somebody who's doing $5 million a month with us is paying for $27 a month. Like it's insane. And funny enough, we did our Scan Power integration and they loved the idea. They launched their own version of early stage and said, you know what, we're going to do the same thing. $27 a month, up to 12 months, early stage, you're good. And so now for less than 97, which is our previous pricing, you get access to 2 tools that also technically integrate. And so for us, we've just been looking at the whole life cycle of sellers and saying, well, we had a lot of people starting with competitors on the cheaper end that were getting frustrated, but they're like, I can't move over. I can't afford it yet. I'm like, well, we need to fix that. So now sellers can get started with Aura sooner at a price that really makes sense for them with no time commitment that's like really strong. And you can stay with us longer because we have these advanced functionality.
When you mentioned how like, wait, let me re-say this. What was I going to say? I'm going to ask you about when someone should get a repricer, but I had a way I was going to say it. I can't remember what I was going to say, but you mentioned something. I know I said that. Okay, let me just think.
Like kind of getting started like sooner.
Yeah, because it was, I can't remember. I'm just going to ask you when someone should start.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I was going to say. So someone who's just kind of starting, oh, I know. I'm going to re-say it. Okay. So I know you mentioned earlier, like how people maybe go years before starting a repricer. And I know for me, I only got one last year. So that was year 6 or 7, because I always felt like I could do it myself, or I didn't have enough products that warranted it. But now having had one, even though it wasn't one that I loved, that it did help a lot. So when would you say someone kind of should jump into getting it? Like what, is there a level or?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I used to have to be very conscious of answering this, because the starting point at 97 was hard for me to say whenever. Like in an ideal world, if there's no cost involved and you said, when should I have a repricing tool, and you didn't have to pay for it, I would say day zero, straight up. So the performance is always going to add value. Now, does it make more sense as you get bigger? Of course it does, but you have to keep in mind a repricing tool can speed up your growth. So just waiting until I'm big enough is not how this works. It's how, like, that's a critical catalyst for how you get big enough, if that makes sense. And so with $27 entry fee, I tend to say it's less about a number and more just, are you consistently sending in inventory? Have you figured that out, right? If you have no inventory, yeah, no, like you don't need to, right? Even $27 a month is nothing, but it's something kind of, right? So like, no. If you have figured out how to source generally, just consistently, you should consider one now, because it's going to, you don't realize the opportunity cost of not having one. I didn't realize until I really started to figure it out and utilize it correctly that I could have been 3 times the revenue I was at by the time I had started. And I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And so, like with Legacy Aura, this has definitely gotten better, but with Legacy Aura, I would tell people from the data we saw with our users, if you're coming to us not repricing, we tend to see a 40 to 60% increase in sales. If you're coming to us from another repricing tool, we tend to see 20 to 40% increase in sales. Now think about that. And that's Legacy, right? Legacy was way worse. Like it was great at the time. And now we have what we have. We're like, oh, that was garbage, right? In hindsight. So it's even better now, but you don't think about like what happens when you can increase your revenue by 20% and let that compound. It's incredible. And so it's less about, that's what the big sellers use. No, 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 no. They had that long before they were big. Promise you. Our average revenue for a seller is about 65 grand a month. That's the average, by the way. Huge variance. We have plenty of sellers, especially now on early stage, that are doing 5 grand a month, that are using it and seeing results. So it's as quickly really as you're able to send inventory in. If you don't know how to source, yeah, you don't need any kind of software like this. But if you have inventory and you're starting to kind of spend more time sourcing, you need to consider it. I wish there's like a better succinct answer. There's just not.
No, that's a great answer, and it makes perfect sense because, like,
Yeah.
I was consistently sending inventory in every week, and I still didn't think I need one, so that
Right.
makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, and what I would say too, like especially for us, like we have that ungated trial, meaning like we don't ask for a credit card. So if you're curious, go try it for 2 weeks. And if you don't see any results, it might be too soon. And so
Mhm.
that's one thing I love about early stage paired with a free trial is like it's not that big of a commitment, right? You can kind of go test the waters and be like, "Oh, cool, it did help. Clearly now's a good time." Or I'm way too soon. I should cancel this. Yeah, great, do it. Right? If it's too soon, I love when people are just like, "Hey, I was really excited. It's clearly way too soon. Can we cancel?" Yeah, of course. Got you covered. Don't worry about it. Like we want to have you back in 3 months when you figure it out. Right? Like I don't care about the money now. I'll care about the money, years down the road.
Nice. So you said your
Yeah.
Discord group is on your website, right? So people can just click
Yes.
it and find it there. And the
Yeah.
website is the the website is goaura.com. And again, you can sign up for the 2-week free trial. I'm going to link all of this in the show notes for everyone listening or watching on YouTube. But thank you so much. I know it seems really exciting and really awesome. And I've heard about this Maven, and she sounds awesome.
Yes. We use AI to name Maven, funny enough,
That's
because
funny.
we had this idea. We said, here's kind of how we view Maven, or how we view the model, what it does. And it's like Maven. I was like, oh, that's actually pretty good. Yeah. So
That's so
it's a good
funny.
time.
AI is going to take over, but we might as well use it where it makes sense for our businesses.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I can't believe that you're an introvert, but people say that about me too. So,
No, it's been a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. Always exciting times for me to be able to geek out. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have a software you love, let me know. I'll reach out to them and get them on the podcast and hear how they started. I absolutely love hearing how companies start. And so it's been really fun getting to know all these different softwares. As I mentioned, all of the links for the free trials are in the show notes. And if you want to be on this podcast about your Amazon journey, your Walmart journey, or wherever you sell, please reach out to me at podcast@yoursellingguide.com. I would love to chat with you. Until next week, happy sourcing.